Guts and Grit Podcast. A podcast where we discuss overcoming the odds, resiliency, and never giving up. Join us each week as hosts John Melson, Joy Vatrabek, and Mark Renahan discuss coming back from failure and never quitting. Guts and Grit, it's go time.
Hello and welcome to the Guts and Grit Podcast. We are on episode 5. We thank you all for joining us. You can find us every Wednesday, and of course, we are on all of the major social media platforms and wherever you get your podcast. Of course, I have with me today my two guests. Joy, how are you, dear?
I'm good. How are you?
I am fantastic. And of course, coming to, are you in Fort Bragg, Johnny?
No. I'm still at Fort Benning.
Fort Benning. I'm sorry. I keep doing this. I'm getting my Alzheimer's. From Fort Benning is, of course, John Melson. And don't forget Noah, our engineer. And we have a very special guest this week. He is an LA police detective. He was once a NYPD detective. And he is featured on the Netflix series Crime Scene, Vanishing at the Cecil Hotel. And don't forget, he is the co-host of the Armbar podcast, the Renaissance man, Mr. Knocko Nolan. Knocko, how are you, sir?
I am doing really well.
Excellent.
It's really an honor to be here with you guys. I was never an NYPD detective, though.
Okay, so you regular.
Those guys are the best, hands down, the best detectives in the world, NYPD. But yeah, I was a patrolman out there. So yeah, just wanted to clear that up.
All right, well, let's actually, Knocko, let's just get right into it, as we always like to do on the Guts and Grit show. Tell me how you started out. You know, you're from New York and you were an NYPD cop, and then you went out to LA. So let's have you tell us.
Well, I mean, just like every other New York Irish kid in New York City, it's like you only got a few choices, right? Like cop, criminal, soldier, and maybe throw in a priest and fugitive in there. So, yeah, my lineage, was heavily populated with protectors. So long line of veterans and policemen. So that was the route that I was destined to take. And I went into the police academy in LAPD back in 96 and from 96 to 2000. And then I had some family issues going on where my wife at the time, we had to take care of a sick relative, came back to New York City and joined NYPD from around 2000 to 2004. And then when that subsided, came back to LAPD, and the rest is in progress right now. So it's been about 26 years or so of law enforcement, and still going strong till the wheels fall off. So here we are. But
were you in New York during the 9/11 attacks?
I was actually on a day off. I was in upstate New York visiting my family, had some uncles and cousins and aunts up there. And once we got the news that the towers where America was attacked, came back down to the city and, spent probably like the next year in a combination of in ground zero of a combination of duties of, rescue and recovery, perimeter site security, recovering evidence at the landfill, everything in between there. So that was like one of the worst and best times of my life, was being able to partake in that. And then the worst was to, have to deal with all those issues and see the toll it took on the city and on the country. And huge thanks and appreciation for John and your boys for, taking the fight for us overseas and grabbing the football and taking it to them and, getting that touchdown and getting some justice for my brethren and, family and friends and, for a debt that can never be repaid. So huge appreciation and gratitude for that. So thank you.
And Knocko, I appreciate it, man. I really do. When folks want to pay thanks and respect for that. I know you just mentioned, like, you were upstate New York spending time with your family when 9/11 happened. And you had already been on the police department for a while. I had already been on the police department. I had my trip and stumble and fell in my life, and I was climbing back. I was actually at the cafeteria at the college I was attending when 9/11 happened, and it's really bizarre. Like, I got to see on the news live, one tower was already smoking, and I'm sitting down eating a sandwich waiting to get to my next class, and then I saw the second plane hit. And our last week's guest was Sean Pierce, and he was actually in the tower on the 73rd floor when the second plane hit. And to listen to his version of what that was like, there was a lot of it I could relate to, some of the extravagant and traumatic moments that I found myself in while we went overseas. But when I was watching it on the news, it was so unbelievable to me. I thought it was, I'm going to be honest, I'm going to sound like a dumbass, but I thought it was a new action movie, like a Bruce Willis movie. I'm sitting next to a guy, and I didn't realize, even though it was saying live, I thought it was Hollywood. Right? I look over to this young 20-year-old student, and I'm in my mid-30s. I was, hey, what movie is this? I've never seen this before. I thought I've seen every action movie out at that point. And he looked at me and was like, hey, jackass, like that's for real right now. And I couldn't believe how bad it struck me, like, down to my core. It was like, are you kidding me? Someone's doing this to us right now? And you being in New York, me in Boston, the big rivalry. Yet the Yankees and Sox, we're arch rivals. We're born that way, right? But there was so much like, who's doing this right now? Like, who would do such a thing? And man, the fire alarms went off, announcements at the school for us to evacuate the school because the flights came out of Boston. And I mean, that day I was at the Marine Corps recruiting office, like, hey, I had already served. And I was like, hey, I want to get back in. How do we do this? And that led me on my journey, and to watch on the news until I could get cleared to serve after, my waivers I needed to get and my surgery.
What was your break in service? How long was the break?
I had a 15-year break between the Marine Corps. Yeah. So between the Marine Corps, I worked for Boston PD for a couple of years, and I screwed up really bad. Right. And I moved on in life. And I feel like God gave me a second chance between, serving my time and surviving the cancer surgery I had, to go ahead and gave me the opportunity to serve again and be like, hey, get back out there and make something of your life. And you mentioned the term payback. Man, there was such a burning feeling inside. A guy that grew up playing hockey in the neighborhood where me and Mark grew up, one of the Bavis twins, he was on one of the flights. And it really struck a nerve with me, like, wow, these flights came out of Boston. I'm in Boston. These knuckleheads came through my town to go in and inflict all that on you folks down there in New York. And it was like, if I can get back in, God's will, if that's his plan, I'm going to get in. I'm going to give it everything I got. And, you guys back in the States, law enforcement, I had so many friends on Boston PD that had driven down to contribute efforts down there at Ground Zero. And, when my buddies found out I was deploying, first off, they were shocked I got back in. They're like, no way, you're back in.
How old were you, John? How old were you?
When I went back in, I was, let me see, so I'm going to be 51 in 2 weeks. So I went in March of 2004. So I think I was 33 or 34 when I went back in.
Wow, that's great.
And Knocko, nothing. I mean, I don't want this to be about me. I want to talk about you. But like, man, after my surgery, I could barely do 3 push-ups when they let me back in. I mean, struggling. And I was always playing ice hockey, and I was very athletic growing up. I was never as good as Mark. I mean, I don't want to take that away from Mark. I was never at the level that Mark was. I used to like to think I was, right? I had ambitions and dreams of like one day playing, maybe even if it was a goon, to knock teeth down people's throats in the NHL. That's all I wanted to do. I just wanted to play hockey. But when after the surgery, I could only do 3 push-ups. And a month after enlisting, off I was. I was heading over to the Middle East, and that's what I wanted. And I got it. And I was so happy. And the different types of people, whether in law enforcement that were also serving in the Guard at that capacity as well, man, I got the utmost respect, because I know, whether you're in law enforcement or in corrections, if I'm dealing with the police, it's because something bad's happening. And then those folks that are in corrections, they're only dealing with bad people. They don't have the choice. Like, well, is this guy a nice guy? He's in jail because he did something bad.
Mm-hmm.
So the level of respect, the mutual peace back and forth, I mean, I can't express how appreciative I am, because while I'm gone, my family's safe because of you guys, you know.
No, that's,
it was just like a real empty feeling. Like once, all the kinetic activities were kind of winding down, and then there's like a helpless feeling of like, wow, we can't do anything really about this to reach out and touch anyone, to get some closure or whatever, disposition on some justice. So when you guys went over there and handled business, it was just unbelievable. And then to work with those guys when they came back, with whether it was reserves or new guys coming back that were active and coming into the PD, man, that was such a great feeling to, hear the stories and work with just amazing individuals that brought so much back from their knowledge overseas. And when I came back to LAPD, I wanted to somehow contribute to, the investigations and all that. And I joined the FBI's Joint Terrorism Task Force. I was working like a counterterrorism role within LAPD, and then we got loaned out to that task force. And one of my partners on there was on loan from the Army, and he was a Ranger, Chris Rosario, just one of the most craziest, funniest, bravest, just very unique individual. And man, we had such a great time working with each other, and I learned so much from him. And so that was really, really a great time to be in the PD, and then melding those two worlds of having that reach back to handle investigations that had overseas implications was phenomenal.
Yeah, and Knocko, we have to. I can't go without giving a shout out to the one and only Jerry Kane, who was nice enough to come on our show. Jerry John was was Jerry a detective? He was a detective, wasn't it? Correct?
Sergeant?
He was a sergeant too, but and a detective, wasn't he, Knocko?
Yes, he was.
Yeah, and so anyway, he came on our show. He was like literally, for lack of a better way, like one of the buildings almost fell on top of him during September 11th. It's a crazy story that he came on and told, but Knocko hooked us up with him, and I just want to give a shout out to Jerry. He's a great guy. And Knocko, yes. I know we were talking offline. Your dad was a Ranger in so you kind of have like a family of service, and you chose the police, which is unbelievably cool. But did after like September 11th, did you think of like, I don't know if your old man was still alive or still is now. I apologize for that.
Oh yeah, he's still kicking up dust in Sarasota, Florida. He was still jumping out of planes. John knows, airborne, so the day they die. So yeah, he's still getting after it. And I was going to enlist post September 11th, and my wife at the time said, if you do that, it's an instant divorce. And so it was a tough decision. And not funny, but I ended up getting divorced down the road, other issues and all that. But I was like, wow, I could have rolled back the clock, but you can't live like that. Who knows where it would end up? I'm in a perfect place where I am right now. But yeah, that definitely was something I wanted to do, but it just wasn't in the cards at the time.
Well, working with the FBI terrorism, that's
really neat.
Yeah, well, that's acceptable, Knocko. That's acceptable. So, all right. Well, listen. Now you're done with New York, and what led you back to LA? Like, how did you end up being Knocko Nolan and Crime Scene on Netflix? I was telling the guys it was cool as can be to see you on that.
Yes.
But how did you get from New York to LA?
From New York to LA was just my fascination with the West Coast of the beach culture, surfing, skating, BMX, and then rolled into the music scene and the arts. I've always had an inclination for music, and everything just seemed like culturally it was happening on the West Coast. So at a very early age, like probably like pre-teens, a buddy of mine, we had ambitions to go to Berkeley and be a marine biologist, and then somehow things changed throughout life. I always had that connection to the water and the sea, the ocean. So that was always a lane within the life where I was destined. And I live at the beach now. And then once it became law enforcement, that was my chosen destiny. I was a student of history, so LA was always on the forefront of policing, very proactive and highly regarded in that arena as being innovators. So I was always I read everything I could about NYPD, LAPD, and all the big agencies, Boston PD, awesome dudes up there. And when the opportunity came up, a buddy of mine hit me up, said, "Hey, they're recruiting. out here for out of state residents, and I jumped on it and never looked back after that. So it's been great.
All right. Well, so I noticed when I was watching the crime scene show that one of the jobs, one of the areas you were assigned to was Skid Row in L.A. And just from watching the interviews, how was that when you first? Was that like I guess shocking? How was Skid Row, that area? How was working that beat when you first got assigned it?
You know what? I forgot to answer your question before how I got involved in it. Real quick, I got to give a shout out to the guys in the AA community, Danny Bora O'Connor, and all the other guys I met through him, and my old man is in a friend of Bill as well. And what they, not being a mentor, but through their leadership, to seeing how they conducted themselves in life, and the big thing was always of being of service. So I chose a life of service, but then even enhanced with their personalities of being asked to do something, like being asked to do a podcast, being asked to speak here, being asked to drive someone to the airport, whatever it is, be of service. So when a friend of mine hit me up, and she runs a great film company, like a tour company in downtown LA that specializes in like crime and true crime and film noir and all that type of thing. It's called Esoteric Tours. The producers of Crime Scene hit them up and said, "Hey, do you happen to know any cops that worked in that area that want to talk on, about their experiences?" So she hit me up, and it was unpaid, and I said, "Yeah, Kim, for you, anything, be of service." And that's reached back to the guys that I grew up with, Danny, my dad, and everyone else, Mike McColgan, or all these Boston, New York dudes that are in that program, and just show up. You don't want to do it. I sat there for 8 hours talking about my experiences, and I didn't know where it was going to be. I thought at the time it was going to be a little documentary, maybe a couple thousand punters would see it, and then as time went on, I found out Brian Grazer and Ron Howard from Happy Days were like the producers of it, and it was like, oh wow, this is a huge thing. I have no idea. And then fast forward, it's like the #1 show for a month on Netflix, and they just asked me for, like I said, for about 8 hours of the experiences down in Skid Row, and it's kind of like working in New York City post September 11th. It's like the best times of your life mixed with the worst. So you see the worst of humanity, but then when you're dealing with them, you see the best of the worst. These people that are going through extremely hard, arduous times and being resilient and rising above their situation. And then on the flip side of that, when you're having a bad day, or you think you're having a bad day, and you come outside and interact with these individuals, and you look at them and you say, my bad day is nothing. I'm being a pussy and whining about nothing. These people out in the street would love to, my bad days would be their worst day. So it kind of flips your mentality of what's, what the world's really about, and to get your mind straight. So that's kind of what I tried to get across within 8 hours, and then condense it into a couple of episodes, whatever. But it's been a great experience dealing with the people down in Skid Row, interacting with them, and it definitely enhanced my outlook on life.
Yeah, John and I were just talking. We have another guest coming up, an Afghan guy, who grew up under the Taliban rule, and John and I were talking about how, like you just said, your bad day. These people would kill for one of your bad days. To give you an example, right now, my car just died today, coming down here, right? And of course, and when it first happened, I'm in my car and I'm yelling at myself in the car and all this, and this is blah blah blah. But I got a buddy who I just called up. He's like, "Yeah, you can borrow my truck for the weekend." And it's really not that big of a deal. But for 5 to 10 minutes, you would have thought that I had been tortured to death for such inconvenience. And when you think about, you working on Skid Row, or John, the things I don't even want to imagine you've seen in all your tours and et cetera, it's kind of like it's not a bad day. And plus, everybody can get through these days with a little bit of guts and grit.
Yeah.
So,
And it sounds from both of them, John spoke about giving back as well in his bio a lot. So thank you both for your giving back to the community.
Yeah, and I got to give a huge shout out to Danny Boy. For those who don't know, Danny Boy is the founder of House of Pain, but most recently, he is the executive director and founder of the Outsiders House Museum, which I apologize, Danny, I have still not been to yet. But Knocko, you mentioned, like, you know, I always know, for example, when we were planning, Johnny and I were planning on the September 11th show, and I was trying to find a cop, I knew I could call you, and I knew you would I know you give back, and I can't thank you enough for that. It's the same with Danny. I mean, my earlier podcast, Danny must have, God love him, he's been a guest about 5 or 6 times. And I'm sure there were times when he was like, mother of God, here's Renahan calling again. What is he going to want now? So, Danny, I can't thank you enough. Although we got to get George on here, Knocko. I haven't been able to twist George on to one of the shows yet, or Uncle Jimmy, Knocko, I think I don't know if I could get away with having him as a guest just because of our talking, but he would be a fantastic guest. But, so how is it now being a cop, Knocko? Has it been different? Has it been challenging the last couple of years with all the madness going on?
It's been challenging, but I got to say it's been great because, through, the riots and everything else and public, sentiment, it's time to go to work. Anyone could coast, and when everything's going great, that's easy. What's like the saying, fair seas don't make a good captain. So this is the time to put up, shut up. Can you last? Can you push through? Can you achieve something? And you could see it as bad times or just a challenge. So again, it's that flipping that mindset. And it's been kind of during the riots was kind of like the Super Bowl of policing. It's been amazing. It's been great. I feel for the people that are having a tough time with it, but this job really it's not meant for everyone. Unfortunately, through hiring practices, you have a wide net of people that you have to throw out. And there's a lot of people that slip through the net that shouldn't be here. And there's a system for getting rid of those people, and only the strong survive. So it's been a really interesting couple of years, and I wouldn't trade for anything else. And it's just, again, going back to being a student of history, our lineage of guys that came before us, a couple of generations before us, particularly the post-Vietnam generation, were kind of going through similar problems they did. So being a student of history and reading all about that, targeted assassinations on the street and riots and conflict and just non-permissive environments, it's just the same thing that's happening now. And I knew it was coming. Was history again. History repeats itself. So I was ready for it. And, train every day, be relentless, and we'll push through it. And the end result is we're going to be way better as an organization and hopefully as a nation once we get through these times. But you want these times. These are the times that build you up. Like I said, when things are going easy, you're not achieving anything. But when it's tough times, it's going to be great because you're going to be better for it when you come out through the finish line.
Johnny, you agree with that? Go ahead, Johnny. Go ahead.
Well, my whole thing is what he's talking about. I preach this to younger soldiers as well as to my peers and those above me as well. Is the unfortunate thing is, and I'm going to say it just as well as for first responders, the police, because you guys get exposed. You get murders, you get child molesters. You see the worst of what we have in society, right? You also get opportunity to see the good, right? But there's a very negative stigma for people in the line of work you're doing, Knocko, and as well as the guys that have gone over and made sacrifices and they come back. We put this negative stigma on, with this PTSD, like there's something wrong with you, like he reacts this way. It's because it's a negative impact. Where I try and preach, just like you just talked about, Knocko, is like, no, it takes a special person to go and have to do this kind of line of work, what you and my buddies do, and to be able to endure, right? So I interpret it as, no, this is going to make you stronger, but there is a struggle that's going to come before you get stronger. Like you're going to struggle. I'm not going to look at you negatively, and we're wrong as a society to say that because you've been exposed to that, there's something wrong with you or I because we can't cope. No, we're going to cope. We're going to get stronger for this. And I try and mentor that to my younger soldiers. And like I said, my peers and stuff, like, no, we're going to get through this, right? Yeah, not everybody can do what you do, Knocko. Not everybody can do what my buddies go and do. And at the end of the day, if we keep going along with this negative stigma, like, oh, he's got mental problems. He can't cope. Look at he's crazy, or he's hypervigilant. That's what I'm, not hypervigilant. I say hypervigilance is a good thing. You're aware of your surroundings. You're just not walking through life numb, with blinders on, not paying attention to what's going on to your left and right, because the world can be dangerous. We know that the world can, especially nowadays with the shootings and everything else going on. It's dangerous just to live in the United States now. And so the fact that guys like yourself and my buddies, also myself in that group, we find ways to cope and find strength in all that adversity and the bad things that happen. And society needs these kinds of people. They need you. They need guys like my buddies to be that strength to get through these hard times, right? Well, I don't want to misquote it, but they say like hard times
require hard men or something.
Right? And then hard men produce good times produce soft men produce hard times. So it's like that vicious cycle we're going around. But that's where those hard men like yourself and the other folks that we work with to our left and right, we're enduring those times because we need to endure that to bring things back around, to bring those good times, right? But it's not a negative thing that, like, geez, is Knocko, is he crazy because of all the things? You've seen the worst in society. Like my short stint on the police department, the amount of murders and bodies that we found on the train tracks, murdered in gang violence, everything in the city of Boston for my small time that I was a patrolman in the area where I work. The normal person can't comprehend being exposed to that. Right? Like Sean was saying last week, he went to work that morning, grab a cup of coffee, he goes to work. He's not trained for high stressful situations. Next thing you know, he's struggling to survive because the building's about to collapse on him. All those people that went to work that day, that's not what they were ready to do. But the firemen and first responders, soldiers, Marines, like we train to still consciously through repetitions, reps, to continually react with, muscle knee-jerk reaction because this is how we're trained. Right. And then later, after the fact, when we get a chance to sit back and absorb what took place, and it's like, holy crap, what just happened? Right. And that is a strength for guys like you. It's not a negative thing. I just want to reiterate and reinforce what you were saying. Like, yeah, there is a struggle, but we come out better and stronger on the back end for the next struggle. That's all.
Yeah. I mean, it's like someone that just haven't done anything physical fitness wise. So that when they get back into it, the first couple of weeks, a month maybe, is going to be hell. You're going to feel like garbage, and like you can't push through it anymore. But once you get past those first couple of weeks, you're feeling and looking a lot better than where you were. So as a nation, you just got to push through. It's like, all right, yeah, gas prices, we did that in the 70s. Shortage of this, yeah, we got it. Horrible politicians. It's cyclical. Let's hold the line. Stay strong and look out for one another. Keep training and pushing, and you'll get through it.
Knocko, I love your positive outcome, by the way. Yeah, it puts a smile to my face. But back to what John was kind of saying, and I wanted to bring up another aspect of your life that I know you really enjoy. Again, like I remember watching the show about Skid Row, and I'm not going to go into the thing that you saw, but with the pigeon story and like seeing things like that. Must really, like you say, screw up your brain. I know one of the things that you host your own podcast called the Armbar Podcast. It's a jiu-jitsu based podcast. We actually have in our office here, she's not here today, but a girl named Charla, whose, I believe, sister-in-law is one of the Gracies. But I know that, like, is jiu-jitsu kind of like an outlet for you to kind of, like if you just went on in your shift, you come back, and again, as one of the protectors of your community, you see some terrible stuff like John was saying. Is jiu-jitsu a great way for you to kind of get your head back straight or release, or how did you get into that, and how does that factor into Knocko the Protector's life?
I got into it actually, New England, two New England guys. One U.S. Navy SEAL is amazing guy that did 20 years in the SEAL teams, Jocko Willink, good buddy of mine, and a guy named Nick Gold. That's a cop up in New England. And he just kept on, peppering me. Hey, you got to get into jiu-jitsu. You're going to love it, blah, blah, blah. So after, two guys that I respect keep on hitting me up, and all right, let me look into this. So I grew up boxing with my old man. So, groundwork was like an alien environment to me, but checked it out, went into it, and loved it. It's first and foremost, it's like the school you're in is the big thing. And the school I'm in, it's called Gracie University, is just packed with a wide spectrum of individuals, of men, women, 20-year-olds to 60-year-olds, and under the like leadership of two of the best instructors. I think is their father was the one that brought Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu to America from Brazil and started the UFC. So it's like straight from the source. So their lineage, you get it from the tap, like the water from the top of the mountain. It's really very pure. So they just run an amazing school. So after a hard day and, at work, coming home and being surrounded by like-minded individuals and, using the exerting the maximum potential within your body and getting that out and learning something, not only moving your body, but as you're being instructed and learning different techniques, it keeps that brain going. And, at 40 something years old to some people are, hitting the brakes and thinking about retirement. I'm just thinking about what else could I do? What else could I, challenge myself? How could I learn? And the side benefit is, for work, trying to take people into custody with the least amount of force necessary. Obviously, nowadays, huge thing, as it should be. So a lot of benefits. And through that school, I met a couple of people who, it was originally their podcast. It was two Marines and an airman. And then as time goes on, like a band, this guy leaves, get another person. They asked me to jump on with the podcast. So I do it with an Anglo Marine, my friend Mike. And so we delve into law enforcement matters, martial arts, and military stuff. So we've had some great guests from that spectrum. So it just has multi benefits, spiritual, physical, and camaraderie. And it just hits all those points. So I can't say enough about going into the martial arts at an older age. If anyone's thinking about that, it's not a lot of wear and tear on your body like boxing or Muay Thai or these other things where you could really, you have a shelf life in those hobbies. But with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, you could do it all the way up to your 70s, 80s, 90s if you wanted to.
I like what you're saying about challenging yourself, constantly challenging yourself. I like to challenge myself as well, and I think Mark as well.
Yeah, Joy is a pilot, so and she was quite a good pilot. And
I got my license when I was 17, and then didn't fly for I want to say 17 years, and got back into it again.
Yes, the brain's a muscle, like anything else.
Yes,
use it or lose it.
That's right. It didn't take that long to relearn everything.
Johnny, do the Rangers do anything? I don't. When you're training, do you guys have like self-defense, or I know you're an animal personally, but I mean, do you guys teach jiu-jitsu or anything like that?
Okay, so several years back, the Army started an initiative within the Ranger Regiment. It was regiment was doing it, working with the Gracies. So they started taking on jiu-jitsu, and then so Ranger Regiment, like we talked about in first episode or second episode, Mark.
Yeah.
They fall under SOCOM. They have programs and initiatives that take place that are at a smaller level, right, versus the entire Army. But what happened was during the big push for Iraq and Afghanistan, we started training soldiers as well on jiu-jitsu, and the Army developed its MACP program, Modern Army Combatives Program. And it's very similar to what the Marine Corps Combatives Program as well, and its incorporation of, hand-to-hand combat with utilization of jiu-jitsu, right? They teach you the far strikes, your punches, your kicks, and then your takedowns, right? So myself, when I was younger, Mark, right about around high school time frame, I started taking where UFC was more like underground. My cousin had taken him and Gary Eblin on Boston PD. He taught the hand-to-hand self-defense stuff on Boston Police Department, but he was a childhood friend. He was older than me, but he knew my whole family. They had a karate dojo in Hyde Park section of Boston. And on Thursday nights, as I was getting onto the police department, they used to give classes. It was a combination. It wasn't so much just focused jiu-jitsu, but I thought it was perfect for like law enforcement, Knocko. It was boxing, then, some kicks, nothing too fancy with the karate, but more into Muay Thai. So the elbows and knees, and then into the jiu-jitsu for takedowns. And I thought it worked out really good for law enforcement because, I want to keep distance. I don't want somebody to be able to pull my own firearm. So that's where the boxing would come into play, right? Then if the suspect or myself, we had to close the distance. Now we're working with elbows, headbutts, and knees. And then if we go hands-on, we're grabbing each other. Now we're into grappling. I do a quick takedown. And again, I was always looking at it as ways like, as it was, step one, we're out here for punching. Step two, we're inside, close with elbows. Step three, I'm doing a takedown. Meanwhile, the whole time as law enforcement, and which incorporates over into the military, I'm thinking, all right, I'm already armed and I can't allow this person to use my own weapon against me. So it was always conscious minded that I was carrying and that weapon could always be pulled on me. So the idea of rolling around too long on the ground was not always one of the things I thought should be a focal point, unless, I did have a partner or my rifle team member was there to put a gun on him while I tie him up, right? But more into the jiu-jitsu, I think a lot of soldiers after the big surge and the Gracies got involved with Ranger Regiment and the Army developed its combatives program, there was a huge surge of soldiers interested in it. And I think this is just my take on it, and Knocko, you might agree. It's also a way to help you cope, right? So it keeps your mind occupied. Like I talked with Sean on last episode, keeping your mind engaged versus to help you cope. So you're not getting caught up in those dark places for all the things you've been exposed to help you become more resilient, more disciplined. And as well as it's good for your body too, as well as, being that shepherd in society, being able to defend yourself and protect others that way as well.
Awesome. Well,
Absolutely.
Gentlemen, we're coming to the end of our hour. I appreciate you both for everything. Knocko, thank you so much for joining us.
Yes, thank you.
Knocko, where's the best place for everyone? Armbarred Podcast. Do you guys just regular old podcast formats where everyone gets their podcast, YouTube, all that stuff?
Yeah, it's all on YouTube and,
All right.
on iTunes, all that good stuff, yeah.
All right. Well, hey, Johnny, why don't you tell both Knocko and our guests who we have coming up next week as our guest on the show?
Okay, so I served 1 year in Afghanistan, 2008, 2009 in Herat, Afghanistan. I was out west. I was working with a MARSOC team, Marine Special Operations team, as well as an American Army in-bed tactical training team with the Afghan company and Afghan infantry company. And he was our actual civilian interpreter. He was an Afghan civilian. He was young, in his early 20s. He worked for us as an interpreter. He put his life and his family's life at risk to come and work for us for what we would consider pennies, but it was good money for him over there in Afghanistan. And he worked for us. He pursued getting a visa, coming to the United States, became a U.S. Army soldier, made it up to staff sergeant, earned a bachelor's degree, got his citizenship. And just recently, he graduated from Officer Candidate School. He is an officer in the United States Army right now, and he's moving his family over to bring his family a better life here in the United States. And one of his important things was to be an American like us.
Wow, that's great.
Awesome. So
Beautiful.
How about his name, Johnny?
Okay, so his first name is Rashid.
That's good. Yeah, that's all we can do. But yeah,
But we had a nickname for him, and it wasn't because he had big arms, but we called him Arm.
Okay.
And every team that he worked for afterwards, that name stuck with him. So his name was Arm.
All right.
He'll be on next week.
Excellent. Well, once again, everybody, thank you for tuning in to Guts and Grit. Subscribe to us on YouTube. You can download our podcast from all the podcast formats. Of course, follow us here on Facebook. Joy, any final last words from you?
I just want to thank you both. Thank you, Knocko, for all your service. John, we already know we thank you very much for your service.
All right. Well, Johnny, why don't you tell Knocko's are big into training, as you heard. Johnny, what's our tagline when you leave?
Okay, so Knocko is the thing I've been telling my soldiers for years, right? As part of why the motivation, why we work out, why we exercise and physically train. And I always break it down to like, hey, if somebody's going to try and kill me, I'm going to make them work for it. Right. So my motivation to train is train to be hard to kill.
Thank you all so much for joining us. Knocko, Thank you again, sir. We'll see you all next week with Afghan interpreter Rashid. Thanks again, everybody. Bye-bye.
Rangers lead the way. Happy Father's Day to all you guys out there.
Awesome. Yes. Thank you.
Guts and Grit. Like, subscribe, comment, share.